Hello, I'm Kamal Santamaria. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, our weekly look at the world of business and finance. This week coming to you from the coastline of Qatar as we put business and the environment head to head. Coming up, we'll take you to the luxury coral capital of the world. What will happen to this community when it's asked to curb its industry in the name of conservation? Also, Asia's growing wealth means more people can afford the delicacy of shark fin soup. But the sharks are being driven to extinction as the business of catching them skyrockets in the Gulf. And the portable farm, which could be the beginning of the answer to a desert land's food security. So welcome everyone to the Corniche here in Doha. Behind me, that pyramid-shaped iconic building, the Doha Sheraton Hotel, playing host at the moment to the 15th CITES conference. CITES being the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. It's basically a treaty designed to find some sort of balance between trading in a species and not, as you'll see in this program, driving it to the point of extinction. That's what we're going to do on the show today. We're going to count the cost of the damage being done to the world's ecosystems by business interests and see if there's not a way for the two to work together. Start by showing you a few numbers just to give you an idea of what we're talking about. According to CITES, $5 trillion of natural assets and nature-based services are lost every year. Nature-based services being things like, farming, fishing, tourism. Take fishing, for example. The annual value of the catch actually landed is about $86 billion, but a World Bank report says overfishing and mismanaged stocks are actually causing the fisheries to lose $50 billion. And think about some other industries as well, which actually rely on the ecosystem. You probably wouldn't believe that the pharmaceutical industry, a $640 billion a year industry, makes up to 50% of its products from natural resources, rare plants, microorganisms, enzymes, those sorts of things. So whether you're catching your living maybe in a fishing boat here off Doha or making it in a laboratory, you can see business and the environment, they do need each other. Perfect case study then. Take you to a town south of Naples in Italy, which has got a 2 millennia old tradition of coral jewellery. Now over there at CITES, they're talking about putting red coral and pink coral on the endangered species list. So what will that do to the coral jewellery industry in this town? A lot of people rely on it. It is part of the lifeblood of the town. Claudia Lavagna reports now from Torre del Greco.
Like every day for the last 50 years, Raimondo Orlando chooses some red coral to turn into fine jewellery. He's only one of hundreds of artisans that have made Torre del Greco, a small town in the outskirts of Naples, the world capital of coral jewellery. This tradition has been passed on from father to son for more than 150 years, but now he fears that a proposal to strictly monitor the trade of red coral will break this traditional chain.
My great-great-grandfather started this tradition in 1840. New regulations could endanger the business. I fear my nephews won't be able to inherit it.
An estimated 30 to 50 metric tons of red coral are turned into jewellery and home decorations every year. Environmentalists say that the harvesting and trade of this precious material is unregulated and is threatening its population. They want it included in the list of species to protect at the Convention of International Trade in Doha, meaning that in the future only sustainable coral can be used in jewellery. Environmentalists like Max Rocco say you don't have to go far to find evidence that the exploitation of coral for fashion is endangering the species.
Once the Gulf of Naples was full of coral, but harvesting for jewellery has basically killed most of it off, as it hasn't grown back quickly enough. Now it needs to be imported from other parts of the Mediterranean or from around the world.
Non-profit environmental organizations like SeaWeb are pushing the matter even further. It launched the Too Precious to Wear campaign to create awareness among customers and push designers to stop using red coral for jewellery. In 2003, Tiffany became the first major company to ban red coral from their jewellery lines, and more could now follow. The Union of Coral Artisans are seeing red.
It's in our own interest that coral needs to be protected because we work with it, but stopping us from trading it, it's not the right way.
The people of Torre del Greco have worked with red coral for so long they're often referred to as corallini, but now they fear that while red coral is being protected, their businesses and tradition are facing extinction too.
So it's the conundrum, isn't it? Business versus the economy, but as you saw in that report there, business doesn't just mean profit. It means jobs, it means livelihoods, it means entire ways of life. Here's another example, bluefin tuna fishing. Now, conservationists reckon there needs to be an urgent ban on it because stocks are down about 80%. But the fact is, one of these fish, and it can grow up to 650 kilograms, a fish like that could fetch $120,000 at a fish market in Tokyo, so it's big business. To get those fish, you've got to go to places like Europe, France, for example. Estelle Yusufa has this report.
Hearing said the bluefin tuna has made local fishermen rich with exports to Japan. If the ban is imposed, French authorities will call on the European Commission to compensate fishermen for lost revenues. Bertrand Denarel cannot wait for compensation. The current fishing quotas mean he's already making little profit. When he heard that the French government is supporting the ban, he's decided to dismantle his $5 million boat and close down his business. He's now filing for bankruptcy.
It's the fourth ship we've built, and we had also invested in a small factory to pack and can the fish when the decision came and killed our business. Our 28 employees are now out of jobs. We're in debt for $300,000 to $400,000. After 30 years of hard labor, we end up ruined.
And then you go from bluefin tuna to something which you might not ordinarily think is on the endangered species list, but sharks, they certainly are. See, in Asia, with the growing wealth there is more demand for a delicacy called shark fin soup, which means there is more demand for shark fins. The thing is, the sharks get killed for the fins and nothing else. So you've got entire species under threat simply because of a type of soup. And the thing is, where there's demand, there will always be someone willing to supply it. And about 10% of the shark fins come from this part of the world, places like the UAE and Oman. With more on that, Nick Clark.
In the restaurants of Hong Kong and China, the dish that's growing in popularity, shark fin soup, an expensive delicacy that growing Chinese wealth is enabling more and more people to afford. Skinned and dried shark fins lined up in stores, thousands of them, each one worth a small fortune, but putting untold strain on a dwindling shark population. Dubai Fish Market in the United Arab Emirates, and a major world hub for shark fin. Here, you don't have to look far to see the extent of the problem, mainly caught in the deep waters between Oman and Iran. Blacktip sharks, carpet sharks, lemon sharks, juveniles by the barrow load.
This is cut there, meat separate, this separate, this is very costly. 1 kg 200, this one, cutting. And meat, 1 kilo 15 dirham, meat.
We've got probably around 3 or 4 generations here of sharks on this slab alone. So it just shows how easy it is to interrupt the whole reproductive cycle and the natural order of life on the reef. I mean, it's quite sad.
There was plenty more to come. First this, the huge dorsal fin of a whale shark. So trade is already restricted by law?
By law on this.
In whale shark fins?
Yeah, so it's a case here of already, an example of an infringement.
How much would something like this be worth?
Well, to them here at this end of the market, around 3,000 to 4,000 dirhams, so we're talking about $1,000. But when it gets to Hong Kong or Singapore, it can go as high as $10,500. So when that gets dried out, it will probably end up in a glass case or somewhere inside a restaurant. So I thought that by now, the UAE was fully on board the whole CITES issues.
And then this, the hustle and bustle of the late afternoon delivery, the really big catch. Dozens and dozens of adult sharks of all kinds. Some are pregnant mothers. Most will be definned and then disposed of. You know, it's quite incredible, and this is just one random day at Dubai Fish Market. And if you needed any convincing that sharks are under threat at all, you need look no further than this. And just take a look over here. You've got the sellers, the fishermen, and the agents all bartering away. They haggle over the price, which rises week by week as shark numbers diminish. Despite appearances, this is a shadow of how things used to be.
80% of the stock they already destroyed.
Every day there would be hundreds and hundreds of sharks here.
Thousands of sharks, olden days, thousands of sharks.
Now it's nearly gone.
Gone.
It is hoped fishing and trading for just 4 endangered species of shark will be banned, but even that will be hard to police. A more radical move would be to make the shark fin trade itself totally illegal. Either way, unless action is taken soon, it may all become irrelevant.
All right, let's look at some expert analysis on this. A little earlier in the week, back in the studio, I spoke to Bjorn Lomberg, who's a professor of environmental economics at the Copenhagen Business School, also the author of a book called The Skeptical Environmentalist. He joined me from New York. Okay, Bjorn, let's narrow this down a little bit. Look specifically at the issue of endangered species. Just as a simple argument, you've got species dying out, you've got environments being overrun, but you've always got people willing to farm them because of money. It's simple economics, supply and demand. As long as there is demand, and there is, then there's always going to be someone willing to supply it and in the end fill that gap.
And that's definitely true. And some parts of this, as we've, for instance, seen with both elephants and certainly a lot of endangered fish, is to make sure that you can actually farm some of these. You know, if you want to supply these products but actually make it a viable business, there's a good argument if you can control it, and that is a big if. Then you can actually move forward and make sure that you can both make a business case but also actually protect the animals, even make them more plentiful. We've certainly seen this working in some parts of Africa with ivory trade, and we're also seeing this very, very clearly, for instance, with crocodiles, which we're also worried we're going to be almost eradicated. But of course, we have huge crocodile farms now over the last 20 or 30 years, and that has actually worked to commercialize it and safeguard the animals and at the same time create a business. So it is possible, but we got to be smart, and we also got to be willing to think outside the box and not just say, no, you can't endanger this animal. We're just going to ask you to stop, because as you say, then if there is a demand, it probably will be filled nonetheless.
But then isn't this the problem then, that the two sides, whilst they might talk positively, they can't ever really see eye to eye? You know, people talk about doing things sustainably. In the end, especially in the eye of the conservationists, those who are going out hunting the shark fins or the elephants or the crocodiles, they're always going to be seen as the enemy.
Yes, and that's true for the sort of very earth-first kind of people. But I think most environmentalists, and certainly if you look at some of the big players like the World Wildlife Foundation, they clearly recognize that you're not going to get any movement on environmental issues unless you also engage the rest of society, the economy, and of course businesses. So you need to find a way where you can accept that some people are actually making a business out of it, especially if it means you end up protecting more animals and do it more environmentally sustainable. So I think we got to get off that idea of saying that there are no win-win solutions. It doesn't mean that they're easy, and it doesn't mean that they're always there. But we got to recognize that very often you can find solutions that do cross over. But what we have to remember is it has to be economically viable, and it has to be smart. And very often we're cited on the one side of environmentalists, as you mentioned, who said, I don't want to have anything to do with it. And on the other side, we often have businesses that are simply thinking of environment as a way to get a quick money fix. That is basically a lot of subsidies. Neither of these two approaches work.
So in other words, and you give a very good description of the environmentalists there, but on the business side, business people have got to see past the dollar signs, which, I'm sorry, that's very tough.
No. You can't expect the business people to see beyond the dollar signs, but we have, as a public and as politicians and policymakers, we have to make sure that we don't just allow them to see the dollar signs. Look, for instance, again, if you look at climate change, a lot of businesses are simply seeing the opportunity to trade in carbon, the opportunity to have carbon exchanges as a huge money opportunity. The businesses who got the richest, for instance, on the Kyoto Protocol, that was the European energy companies that got all the emission permits for free, but ended up charging their consumers about a dozen billion euros a year for the first 2 or 3 years. That was a great deal for them, but it was a very bad deal for European consumers. And so we got to keep asking ourselves not just to do green stuff, but to make sure that it's not only to the advantage of businesses.
When Counting the Cost returns, we continue with our look at business versus the environment as the CITES Endangered Species Conference goes on here in Doha. We take a trip to the Everglades in the United States and a bold deal to save them. But the continuing fallout from the recession could destroy that fragile ecosystem. That and more in just a moment. Welcome back to Counting the Cost, your weekly business stop here on Al Jazeera. This week, out and about here in Doha as the CITES Endangered Species and Trade Conference goes on here in Doha. Now, we're going to continue our look around the world now at different species, different environments which are threatened by business. I'm going to take you to the Everglades in Florida in the United States, an extraordinary, one-of-a-kind subtropical ecosystem which is under threat from a lack of clean water. Now, there is a $500 million plan to restore it, repair it, but then there's also been a recession in the United States, hasn't there? So which comes first, the money or the land? Rob Reynolds has more.
They call it the River of Grass. The Everglades, South Florida's immense freshwater marshland, is a singular and complex ecosystem. It teems with animal life and is a vital supplier of water for 7 million people living in South Florida's cities. Jesse Kennan knows this land as well as anyone. He can summon alligators by imitating their squawking calls, a skill acquired during 69 years of living with swamp creatures.
You have white-tailed deer, raccoon, possum, squirrel, otter, rabbit, mink, wild boar, black bear, panther, fish, frogs, turtles, snakes, snails, so you have a big variety.
But the Everglades have been under threat for decades, partially drained, whittled away by urban sprawl, the water siphoned off for big agribusiness. Government-supervised restoration efforts began in the 1980s, but proceeded fitfully, and conservationists feared the battle for the Everglades could be lost.
And if all the government agencies of the wealthiest nation on earth can't figure out how to solve the problem of fixing the Everglades, we really question what hope there is for the rest of the planet.
Then, in 2008, Florida's governor made a landmark deal with the giant U.S. Sugar Corporation to buy 776 square kilometers of cane fields for $1.75 billion. The land would be permitted to return to marsh, allowing water to flow from Lake Okeechobee in the north through the wetlands to the south. The bold deal was called the last best opportunity to heal the Everglades. The agreement to buy the sugar company's land was supposed to have saved the Everglades once and for all. But now a sour economy and intense political pressure from opponents mean the whole deal is in danger of unraveling. Rival sugar companies, including Florida Crystals, a heavyweight campaign contributor, want to scuttle the purchase of U.S. sugar land.
This deal has the potential to negatively affect our members by providing a government subsidy or bailout to a competitor company.
Others say it's simply too expensive at a time when state tax revenues have dwindled due to the real estate crisis and the recession. But at a South Florida Water Board meeting, environmentalists demanded the agency seal the deal.
This is actually the first time in Everglades restoration that we have had a viable option on where to acquire land that we can store water in a very critical area. I would argue that we can't afford not to do it.
Back in the marsh, where big alligators bask in the sun, Jesse Kennan says it's time for government and business to restore what nature created.
It's a very unique, very fragile ecosystem, and you have an awful lot of people that are playing a lot of games with it.
So what have we seen so far? Species an environment under threat from business, under threat essentially from demand. So what about dealing with demand in a different way? See, here in Qatar, for example, 90% of the country's food is imported because, well, it's hot, it's a desert, it's pretty tough to grow the food here. So enter a high-tech portable farm that's going to be on its way here from Japan in the not too distant future. Perhaps a way of starting to meet that local demand and even improve food security. Here's Harry Fawcett with more from Tokyo.
As a source of fresh vegetables, it's an unlikely contender. A shipping container sitting on an unlovely patch of industrial land outside Tokyo. But inside lie the secrets that have led a Qatari company to spend up to $800,000 on bringing the unit to the Gulf. Rows of lettuces grow under fluorescent and LED lights, their roots drinking directly from nutrient-laced water, the whole process climate-controlled and protected from the outside climate, all potentially powered by the sun.
We can produce all those vegetables on all year round, 365 days basis, while agriculture in Qatar, for example, is limited, only 3 months period. So I think this is very, very stable. We can supply the vegetables, you know, all year round, no temperature, no price fluctuation.
That price is high though. Mitsubishi itself estimates that this way of growing lettuces costs 3 times more than traditional agriculture.
The manufacturers say this is just a proof of concept. They aren't going to flood Middle Eastern countries with individual containers like this one. But if it works and if people like what they grow, then big factories full of these sorts of things could start springing up around the region.
In fact, Qatar is already exploring the use of hydroponic greenhouses as it seeks to reduce the proportion of food it imports, currently more than 90% of total consumption. That leaves it, like other countries in the region, at the mercy of a capricious global food market likely to become ever more volatile in the coming years. But unlike its neighbours, Qatar's strategy is not to buy or lease foreign agricultural land, rather to invest in agri-businesses abroad and new technology at home.
Our most constraining factor is water, and we need to find a renewable way like solar desalination to produce the fresh water which we need for agriculture and also for human consumption. So that is one aspect. Now when you have the water, our environment is still harsh for plants. Then the next step is we need to grow under protected agriculture.
And agriculture doesn't come much more protected than this. One shipping container won't overcome Qatar's food security issues, but it will serve as a technological test bed in the effort to solve one of the region's most pressing problems. Harry Fawcett, Al Jazeera, Tokyo.
That's about it for our CITES special here on Counting the Cost this week. Check us out online though when you get the chance, aljazeera.net/English. You get there from the programs link. My weekly blog's up there, extra online content available, and we'll be tweeting very soon as well, so keep an eye out for that. It's all as ever at aljazeera.net/English. For now though, that is it from Counting the Cost. I'm Kamal Santamaria from the whole team. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.